Blessings. Welcome back, everyone. I'm astrologer Elsa Wadsworth, joined again today, thankfully and gratefully, by astrologer Martien Hermes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here again.
Mm.
Exciting to talk today about our topics, but before we dive into the topic, I just wanted to cover just a few thank yous and a few announcements. So we're to 1,000 subscribers, which we've been working on for a long time. So thank you guys for coming and joining. And if you haven't subscribed and you're coming in the future, consider it. And thank you for tuning in. Because of your support, we actually got our channel monetized, Martien. I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but
Oh, great.
now, yeah, people can send super chats, super thanks. We can go live and do all that kind of like extra fun stuff, which is a cool thing to like support the channel or be able to do more interaction, maybe little chart things and
Mhm.
whatever, but it allows people to leave tips on the videos too. So if you guys feel so inclined, you can send a super thanks to Martien below in the video. And that being said, to me, this is super exciting. We have a store now where we're selling merch. So we have Thema Mundi gear and what I'm excited mostly about for this, I mean, I love the Thema Mundi gear, and it's like, kind of branded channel gear. So you guys should check that out. It's on sale actually, because when you open a store, it's on sale until the 22nd. So check that out. But what I'm excited about it is a project I've been thinking about and wanting to do for a long time. And I'll be doing like another iteration of it in the future. But for now, we have it for the first time, a clothing line that has clothing for every planetary day.
Oh,
Yeah. So we have it like written in Greek. So the Koine Greek, and it's small and discreet, but it's like color coordinated. So for instance, Tuesday we have red gear with like the planet Mars written on it in Greek.
mhm.
So if you do dress for planetary days or you want to sort of invoke the planets in kind of a cute way, you've got planetary gear that you can check out.
Great.
So, yeah, so thanks everyone for that. And it's because people are interacting with the channel. I think it's not even because of necessarily the subscriber amount. It's because you guys are watching the content and the watch hours got to a certain point and that you're interacting with the channel that we were able to do this like clothing line and super
Mhm.
thanks and everything like that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and for being here with us. So we appreciate that. All right,
We,
I think that's it for news. Oh, except for Firmicus Maternus, Ben Dyke's translation, Mythesis, every last Monday of the month, 2024. Join us. All right, Martien, take us away with today's topic. What do we have? What are we talking about today?
we will be talking about, I believe it's the last hurrah of Robert Schmidt before he passed away, sadly. And it was about the much debated issue about whether or not whole-sign places were the original Hellenistic Greek system. But there was also something else involved, which has to do with the equal places. So I'll be talking about that in my presentation because that has a lot of impact on how things should be analyzed and determined and delineated. So that's an interesting topic. So
Yeah, with like a
I have,
mixture.
sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead. Do you want to finish?
Well, there was a lot of debate about this, so I will be going into that based on the talk that Schmidt did on that, the conversation he had with two of his interlocutors, and the PDF that he produced, and the MP3 recordings that he sent with it. So that was the last thing I got from him, and it's very interesting. And he objected to the idea because he had mentioned this problem in 1996. And he was surprised that nothing had been done with all that material because it was known that there were only three house systems in Hellenistic astrology, but they were never further investigated by no one, not even me. So, and all the other persons doing Hellenistic astrology. So that was quite
Yeah,
revealing. Yeah.
yeah, and even like an eightfold system that was seemingly coming
Mhm.
from the early part of the tradition. So,
Uh,
what I want to say about this before we get started for the viewers is it is a hot button topic. It is contentious. And
Mhm.
I think, I won't speak for Martien, but I think it's worth thinking about and talking about. And I know it's still actually a hot button issue today. And of course, I don't know like what the happenings and the talk that was happening, in the time of 1994, Robert Schmidt and all these things. But I do know that it still brings about like a lot of contention, maybe in online spaces. And I want everyone to interact with your thoughts below in a respectful way. Thank you. And then also, what I want to say is I think it's actually good that people get riled up about it, that they get passionate about it, that they think about it. I just encourage you to like be flexible in your mind and in your heart with like, okay, these systems work for this and this system works for this. Like people can use their different house systems and work them however they want to. Martien's going to present today like a way in which Schmidt taught the possibility of, and he was well studied on it. So, play with it, try to understand it, work it out in your own mind. I think understanding the debate is really important. Understanding why we use the houses the way they did, the way they were conceptualized, and what they were used for is a big part of our practice. So there's no need to be in sort of contention or fights around it, but to be passionate and understand what you're learning is important. It's fun and it's cool. So I just encourage our audience to not be a part of sort of the fighting when it comes to like house division, but to investigate and to learn as much as you can about the topic and to engage in the comments below in a respectful way.
Great. Yes.
Well,
I'll be giving examples, so hopefully people will learn something about the possibilities of this system. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. This is going to be fun. So buckle up. Here we go. House systems.
Okay. So here we are. I'm going to put this down. Right. Okay. So yeah, this is the Holstein houses debate and the equal places and the practical use, especially the latter one, the practical use, because I did a talk on that for more scientific oriented astrologers, and that went far into the problems Schmidt had on a theoretical level, and I will address that briefly, but I will especially go into the idea of how to use them and what the results might be or the implications might be for using these systems for delineation. So yeah, we use in principle 5 Hellenistic delineation principles. So of course we start with planets mostly, and they signify the what, or each planet is doing something as a ruler of perhaps another planet. And the how of that has to do with the nature of the planets themselves. And the question again, with what is the planet doing something, that has to do with the dispositor, because it's the guest-host relation. So any planet needs to be judged in the sense that it is doing something with what the host is offering. And that has to do with the image where the said planet is located. Then, of course, we have the important part having to do with this talk, which is the planet location. Where is the planet doing all this? In one of the 12 places. And the question also is, of course, under what conditions, because dignity, configurations, retrogradation, etc., all have impact on how we delineate the principles of the planets working in a specific place in the chart. So, and then at long last, we get the idea of the Time Lord periods. So this is in basic principle the major topics of how we do Hellenistic delineations. So, okay, so let's have a look. So we're going to focus on this, the 12 places, because the what and the how is strongly influenced by the location of the planets in specific places in the chart. So, and the contention of this paper of Schmidt was that the Holstein places and the equal cusps together conditions this what and the how, and so I will go deeply into that material. So let's have a look. Let's start. Now, the big, let's say, problem with modern astrology or astrology in general is that there are so many systems of dividing the places, the houses. And as you can see, there are many, many systems. I believe I spoke one of these scientific-oriented astrologer, and he said there were about 70 systems to establish which cusp is the best one and which one then says that this division of houses is the best one. So, and Schmidt was opposed to that. So let's have a look what he had to say. So what's the problem? What's the problem? And the problem is that all these methods, all these systems, as far as I know not many of them, but the ones that I use were especially Placidus. And the problem is that the issue is that it's not about mapping the 12 places in the celestial sphere or vice versa. And that's very important because that actually is the tripping stone for all these systems, because what they are all doing is trying to map the heavens into the astrological principles of the ecliptic. And it's actually the other way around. So I will show that. So it's not this. So that we can safely put that aside. So let me explain this. So first of all, this is what Schmidt, I will not be reading this beautiful thing that I quoted from his basic course, part 1. The important principle is that Schmidt was, of course, a Platonic astrologer. He was convinced that the Hellenistic astrology was simply put together in the sphere, in the sense of Platonic philosophy. And he struggled with that a long time because he couldn't actually prove it, but it was always there in the background, according to him. And when he accepted that, a lot of things fell into place, so to speak. So
you can go to Robert Schmidt Astrology, is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
We will put the link below.
Okay, so yeah, what's the problem that Schmidt had with everything that's going on now regarding the many house systems? It has to do with this study. And this is what Schmidt said about it. A careful study of Manilius' terminology has led many astrologers to conclude that in talking of the houses, he's referring to a method of division which encompasses the whole celestial sphere and the local framework of the observer, and not simply the region of the ecliptic. So all later methods of house division attempt to apportion the houses as divisions of the zodiac, and it offers an argument, etc., etc. Well, the problem is that this is not the case, because Manilius is looking at the question of the houses or the places in a three-dimensional sense, and that's part of the problem, having to do with the spherical universe, the spherical sphere. And that leads to thinking that the problem is one of mapping this fixed framework relative to any local horizon, because we are all born at a specific local horizon, right? Within the celestial sphere, and that's the fixed framework, and that has to be somehow mapped into the ecliptic. And that's the difficult, that's the problem that is going on, and I will explain how Schmidt defended the principle that it has to do with the ecliptic alone, and it has nothing to do with mapping something in outer space and mapping that into the house system. So again, Ruger used the term mapping for that. And the problem is that this leads to the fact that mapping of the heavens into a house system, we also have many different house systems today, and the more the merrier, it seems. That's what Schmidt said. And this is often defended by astrologers by suggesting that the purpose of one type of horoscope interpretation requires a different house system. There we have the issue that will probably result in the most comments that we will get on this talk, because people think a good birth chart reading works best with system A and a horary chart works best with system B, etc. And there might be many more that you can posit to say, well, this one works best for this item, etc. So usually that choice depends on whom one learned the method from. because when I started doing astrology, I as a matter of course used the Placidus house system, and the reason was that my teacher used that, and I thought there was nothing else. Or whenever there was another system mentioned, it was only confusing. So that's a bit of a problem. But this is
Yeah. And I think also like that's the safe way of approaching houses or the diplomatic way of approaching houses, which
Mhm.
is, if your teacher taught you with one system, go ahead and use that. And if they, depending on who taught you for what method, go ahead and default to that to sort of respect whatever lineage you're coming from. And just to be safe as far as like, well, I learned with this and my teacher taught me that. And then this teacher taught me this. So when I'm using his method, I'll use that. And that's the safe model for people, or at least the most diplomatic model versus like fighting on what's best for where or something. But I hope that this provides like a little bit of just understanding whether or not you still want to use system A or B, or default to your teacher's methods, which is very diplomatic. This should help us understand a little bit more about it. Is that right, Martien?
Yes, but we will. The main problem is that in all these systems, the topics of the specific houses get shifted about the natal chart, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
problem that is happening because a lot of people, for all sorts of reasons, think that the meridian, the 10th, the MC, is the designation of the 10th place, and that's where the 10th place starts in modern astrology. And that's not the case because there's something else going on. I will show that.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah, there's the problem. Okay, well, Schmidt he's trying to challenge the very basic idea that there's any kind of mapping going on whatsoever. So we understand, and this is us Hellenistic astrologers, we understand the motions, or rather the divisions of the ecliptic, in terms of concepts that belong to the ecliptic alone. So there's nothing going on from far outer space put into the zodiac alone, and then that needs to be transformed into some sort of house system. No, it's simply the motions of the ecliptic are the reference principle having to do with how the places are divided. So that's the reference frame, right? It's a matter of referral to the ecliptic, and referring of something to a reference system is not mapping. So that needs to be understood. So the reason why it's important is that concepts have been developed within the framework of the ecliptic itself. So when you base your astrology on Hellenistic principles, you need to take that into account because there's nothing going on in Hellenistic astrology having to do with mapping. It's simply principles based on the idea of the ecliptic and how it moves. And that's it. And there we have the whole sign images that are, of course, the content of the ecliptic, right? So
Yeah.
the content of the ecliptic. So, and this was another objection that Schmidt had when asked why a specific house system is to be preferred or about its excellent, exactly what it reveals or what's unique about it. Schmidt said that he did not come across any single report over the years that really meets that criterion. That it is a demonstration of the special excellence of this particular method. People simply say, well, it works for me. And that's, of course, the least rational argument that people can have, because then you need to ask, why is it working for you? Does it have to do with that you're using certain interpretation principles that can be bent in some way? I'm not sure. And that's not meant as an attack, but it needs to be something that you need to consider. So
Yeah,
the
and I
yeah.
think in the consideration, I mean, it's worth having grounded consideration
Mhm.
about. Um, it's possible that the "it works for me" argument
Mhm.
is true on some level because there's oracular space and oracular things happen. And so, okay, it can live in that space and that's fine. But I think the "it works for me" argument is also kind of well, it's a place to hide, maybe, okay, being sort of more accusational about it. Maybe it's a place to hide, but being more forgiving about the argument. It would be just a way of sort of disarming the other to not, need to fight. Well, it's like, okay, well, it works for me. Okay, whatever works for you is fine. Okay, well, this works for me and whatever works for you is fine. And it sort of is disarming what could be like an intellectual sparring or something like
Mhm,
this.
mhm,
So I understand. So if you're one of those people, I'm just trying to be nice to the audience. If you're nice, you can go with an oracular space and you can go with, the it works for me model if you're wanting to disarm and disengage from, a house division fight amongst your other astrological folks and peers. But we are just, and thank you, Martien, for doing this, trying to break down how one might think about it if there is confusion about it, and then how you might be able to talk about it in reference to what system you're using. And I think why things work and how they work are important to explore. So yeah, just for the audience, just to like make you feel like, if you're one of those people, there's reasons why we would say it works for us,
mhm,
good, bad, and indifferent. And I think there's probably good reasons why someone would want to disarm and disengage that sort of interlocked with their peers, maybe to
mhm,
be
mhm,
harmonious with the astrological community or a friend. But then also, this is for your mind, right? To sort of
mhm,
understand when you're using a house system, why you would be, to sort of let your mind rest a little bit on it, not to weaponize it against like other astrologers or whatever. So this is for us to understand our practice and methods better for our
mhm.
own selves.
Right.
Yeah.
So my question mostly is, whenever people say it's working for me, then I want them to explain why. Because I have a small example. People are very distressed, often modern astrologers, when you talk about malefics, for instance, Saturn. And a good example is when people come to me after a reading or a talk that I gave, and they say, well, I have Saturn in the second house and my finances are really good. And that's all sort of to say or to imply that, yeah, your method of malefics is not working. But then I need to ask, but why is this Saturn in your second house not posing any difficulty or something? So there's always a reason, and it needs to be an astrological reason why this Saturn in the second place is behaving pretty good. So, and people often take such comments as, well, it simply proves that traditional astrology is all BS, right? So that's important to ask yourself, even if you're very convinced about the system that you're using. Each time try to understand, why is this working this way? Why is it not meeting up to expectations, or why is it explicitly meeting up on expectations? So that's very important.
It
So,
is. It is, especially to, let's say, there's a huge amount of people coming into astrology,
mhm,
that I'm meeting that never practiced modern astrology and got introduced
right.
on the traditional level, whether it be
Mhm,
medieval or Hellenistic or whatever. It's growing. Um,
mhm,
but this is like a background and sort of a ground for you to be able to understand your own practice even more. And like
right.
even for us, I was listening to a talk from Schmidt, and he was saying how the exceptions to the rule are
Mhm,
actually the interesting part, and the part that makes you like a better astrologer, and the part that
right.
actually makes you understand what the mechanism of astrology even better. So even if you were introduced to traditional astrology and you already trust the method and there's no resistance there, it's actually understanding the depths of these systems and why they work that allows you to become a better astrologer in your own methods.
Mhm,
Because why would what is it about Saturn, something that might produce lack or something like this, that's actually allowing abundance financially, right? And so we do that, we work the system, we look at these conditions, right, Martien, the conditions of the planet. So anyway, just back to say that this will be helpful, these methods, even if you don't have resistance to the system that you're learning being a traditional one or Hellenistic. It'll help you understand when anomalies occur,
Mhm.
Why the systems matter at that moment, right? And then what to look for and how to really use the rigorous process of the system of the mind to help you
Mhm.
get those proper
All
answers.
right.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Next one. So next we need to look at the terminology because, as you all know, the Greek was very important for Schmidt's restoration of this astrology. So it's important to take note of the terminology. So let's have a look. Well, first we need to talk about planets being in places. And in the whole sign systems, these are very important ones because we tend to understand, for instance, planets in good places to be strong. But the principle is not really about strength, but it's more about being at work. So the good places are called krematistikos, and that has to do with being busy. So, and there are places where planets are very busy, places where planets are busy, and some places where planets are less busy, which is the akrematistikos places. So we need to understand that because there's a definition coming up that Vetjes Valens used, and there was in a retranslation by Schmidt that has this idea, the planets in places, and then all sorts of other things are mentioned. So let's get on to that. So planets busy at work. This is the definition. It actually has to do with a level of activity and perhaps less with strengths, but we tend to understand things having to do with strengths when planets are very busy. They are really imposing themselves on all sorts of things going on in the life of the native. So we tend to say that they are strong, but actually they are very busy. It's a small difference, but important to keep in
Well,
mind.
it is small, but if you don't mind, I'm sorry
I
for
don't. I
interrupting.
don't.
Um, it's one thing to call something strong. I guess just an example of like a delineation method. What would we do if we had, what would we say to someone who had a strong planet? Telling them the planet's strong doesn't really give them a lot of interpretive value. And you might check this out in your chart. If a planet is rendered crematisticos, which you should be able to understand after Martien's presentation today, if it's angular or rendered crematisticos, you
Mhm.
know how we have this range of significations, let's say for Mars, right?
Mhm.
Mercury has too many to count. So for Mars, you have from like the protector and the fierce warrior to like the violent aggressor or something like this, right? And then you have all these significations in between. Maybe a planet that's busy would have multiple significations in the life,
Mhm.
many activities having to do with Mars. So you would see violent aggression sometimes, and you would also see protection sometimes, and everything in between. And you would just have Mars, 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 Mars. Like everywhere you look, all these different significations of martial activity, right?
Mhm.
Whereas
Right.
maybe if the planet was not crematisticos, you might have a few Mars like events in your life.
Mhm.
They might be strong to whatever uh timing is happening. They might happen, they might really say something about the life, but maybe they're not happening all the time in everyday life with many variations, right? And so
Yeah.
when we say a planet is at work or it's busy, you might see a multitude of ranges in your everyday life versus maybe like one or two events. Do I have an understanding maybe about that? Is that a good example?
This is a very good example. Yes. Yes. Because these planets produce 100%, it's often said, and the succeeding places uh, uh, deliver for 50%, and the cadent places 25%. But that has to do with the level of activity. So yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks. So, people relative new to Hellenistic astrology, we have the Kendra, which are called angular houses in nowadays parlance. My question is always, where do you find an angle in a round chart? So no, these are the Kendra, the pivots, and that word is also very loaded. the reason why these kentra are important, because in the ecliptic, these are the places where the ecliptic changes direction or shows something. So the first place is a kentra. Why? It's a pivot because this image moves from the night hemisphere into the daily hemisphere. The 10th place is a cantron because the ascending part of the ecliptic starts to go down from that point on. And in the 4th place, the 4th image is the place where the descending part of the ecliptic starts to move up again. So that's the reason why these are cantra. Something changes there, something pivots there. That's the reason why this is the referring of the principles of these places to the ecliptic. And it has nothing to do with whatever else is going on outside in outer space or something. It's simply referred to the ecliptic. So that's interesting. And the referential places, which we call the succeeding places, which is actually more referential because they refer back to the cantron where they are coming from. I will show that has to do with the pivotal trio, no, the house trios. I'm losing
the angular triads.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. I will show that. And then we have the places flowing forth because they are sort of gliding off the kentra. So that's important. So you can read that simply by pausing the video and simply see how this is mentioned by the specific words used by the Hellenistic astrologers.
And you'll hear it being just a note on the language. You'll hear Kentron with an N. You see Kentra there, which is fine. Just so people know, it's the same thing as we're talking about if you're learning Hellenistic astrology and you hear the Kentron with an N at the end, and you hear about them being the tent stakes or the angles, that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Exactly. Thank you. So these are the angular triads. And that's very interesting because the significations of the specific houses, I will call them houses, actually they are places, but okay, I will call them houses for easiness sakes. For instance, when you take the 10th pivot, the 10th cantron, the two images flanking that are actually having to do with the topics of the 10th place. So the 9th place has this topic because it has to do with the 10th place. That's the thing pulling the 10th place over the top, so to speak. And the 11th place is pushing the 10th place over the top. So they are connected to each other, as are the first angle, the first cantron, the first pivot, and it's associated with the 2nd place and the 12th place. So they are connected, and that's the reason why the angular triads are sort of discovered by Robert Schmidt. So they are very interesting, not the topic of this talk, but it's very interesting how the topics got related to these cantra, and that's in a very interesting
it is like the interpretive value, but even without going into the interpretive value of like the 12th and the 2nd referring to the 1st, as far as like how they're working, one's falling away and one's sort of moving towards it. What I think is interesting, and I would encourage new students or anyone to try, which is we're used to seeing our wheels as circles, which are astrological wheels as circles, which is fine. But if you guys have ever tried to draw the square chart or the medieval chart or anything like this, you'll really notice the kentron and the angular triads just screaming at you, just jumping right out of the chart. And you can really see the pivots when you draw a chart that way. So, as you're learning, practice just sketching out those quick draw square charts, and you'll kind of see this method, or this, I guess, where the interpretive value comes in, or this, I guess, exemplified. The triads or the angular houses really exemplified in visually, just in the way we see the chart in a very, very fundamental or basic way versus a circular chart.
If people want to get deeper into how the significations are related to this principle of the angular triads, there's an article by Robert Schmidt called The Facets of Fate, which really goes deep into this material. It's very fascinating to read, so I refer you to that, and perhaps we can put it in the show notes. Okay, so yeah, this is the planet's busy at work. So there are central images, the centra, the pivots. There are referential images that refer back to the specific centron, and there are images that flow away from this centron, but that also have a signification. For instance, I always say, look at the fifth place. In the diurnal movement, it's moving toward the fourth. So what's coming to the natal, to your homestead? Children. The third place, what's leaving the home? Brothers and sisters, right? So
Indeed.
that's a very simple illustration of this principle. Okay. Now we come to the issue of the house cusps. I do this in a very abbreviated way because the talk about this is going on, and it's very important to read that, but I simply want to give a sort of synopsis of whatever everything that's going on with this. So now we need to address the idea of the cusps. Again, endless discussion about what is the correct cusp system, and it turns out that the equal cusp system is the earliest one because it's mentioned in the book by Valence, and it's pretty simple. You can read it, but what it simply says, what the equal place system entails is that you simply put the portion of the rising degree, this in this case the 18th portion of the crab, Cancer, you put that in all the specific places, and then you get this chart. So this is the whole sign place chart together with the equal places. So now we have to address the issue, what's different about these two locations. So I will be going into that. Okay, I hope this is pretty clear. It's a very simple method. Simply put the portion of the rising degree in all the other images. So you never have images that fall completely into one house or two cusps falling into one image, etc. These problems are solved by these methods, by this system, right? Okay. So this is reflected in the manner in which these things are talked about in the ancient texts. So the four centra as places are simply always predicated by being a reference to the images, to the signs. The first sign, the 10th sign, the 7th sign image, and the 4th complete image. The whole sign places, so to speak. And when they are talking about the other divisions of the equal places, they talk about the centron to degree, which simply means then they are talking about the portion of the rising image as placed in all the 12 other images, or the remaining 11 images. So that's a sign within the equal house cusp. So, sorry, within the whole sign places, and that's the equal places. So this is then the division that was used in ancient astrology. So this is what I did when I started to use the whole sign house method, but I got slapped on the wrist by Vettis Valens and actually more by Robert Schmidt, because this is the thing that he translated in from Vettis Valens. If someone should reckon generally, platicos, sorry, a single place for each sign, which is a rare occurrence, they are engaged in acts of constraint and violence, or they are entangling matters. Or the possible better translation should be rather than interlacing methods. So actually, Valens is telling us in no uncertain terms that it is important to take into account the equal places along with the whole sign places. Okay, now we have a problem, because now there's something introduced into the nice division of the 12 whole sign places, and now something else is introduced. So what's that about? So let's have a look. Now this is a bit of a big principle. This was the new translation that Schmidt gave about a specific passage in the book by Vettis Valens, the first book. So he retranslated it, and this is how it reads. So then when the benefics are lying in place, epitopos kaimenos, and well situated, kalos kaimenos, they affect, apotoleo, brings to completion their own significations according to their own nature, as well as the nature of the sign, with the testimony through aspect or advocacy through co-presence of each star mixed in. But when they have fallen amiss, parapiptae, they are indicative of hindrances. Now, that's a large one, so let me address the issues that are mentioned here. So the question is, what then is meant by the idea of epitopos, lying in place? What does that entail? And being well situated, in what images are planets well situated? We know this because that are the good places, as I've shown here. These are the chromatisticos places, and the bad places, so to speak, are the other ones, as you can see here. So we know this. We know that this is something specific having to do with good or bad places. The own significations according to their own nature. So there are conditions where a planet cannot bring to completions its own significations, nor in accord with its own nature. So the question is, what are these conditions? The nature of the sign, well, what are these natures? We mostly know them. Testimony and advocacy. It's interesting to say that whenever a planet is together in the same image as another planet, then it's called advocacy, which is an interesting difference. It's not testimony, it's not an aspect, but it's something else that's interesting to take note of.
And that's this when a planet shares a place with another planet.
Right, when they are in the same image.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because we would advocate, or we would want, one would think, that we would like advocate for the people we're living with or the tribe or something. It's less about saying, hey, I testify that I saw this over here this one day. And it's more like, hey, I'm advocating for my housemate.
Yeah. I'm supporting this person or principle or whatever. It's a support of sorts. So yeah, that's interesting. Because the planet is then doing something different than when it's about testimony. So, yeah, interesting. Interesting difference, right? It's a subtle difference. And the other question is, what is falling amiss? The word parapipto. So, yeah, these are the things that I addressed in my Patreon on this topic, my complete
treatment.
Treatment of whatever is given there. So, but this is something that we need to investigate further. So we'll take a closer look at this issue, the epitopos principle. What is that about? So Schmidt said, this is what Valens said. It's a carefully written passage, tells us on what circumstances the planet can affect its own significations and bring them to completion. That is an interesting difference, right? So it doesn't mean that the planet is inactive, because when it's in a cantron, even though it's not in the right place, it's not epitopos in that cantron, it still has a strong influence. It's very busy, but it has a different character. So that's interesting. And he also said, there was a time when I thought that the term epitopos might refer to the situation when a planet is in its own zodiacal places. So domicile, exaltation, in its own bounds, etc. But this can hardly be the case, because there was a different word used for that. It's called idiotopeo, which is different from epitopos. So let's try to investigate what this difference is all about. So the delineation, because that's what we're after, right? We want to try to understand what's going on here and what is meant by all this interesting stuff. So let's have a look. This is a small part of a chart, and you can see that the bull is the whole sign place good diamond, but you can also see the 11th equal cusp, and then you also see the 12th equal cusp. So what's going on here? So, well, the epitopos region is this one, and the atopos region is that one. So the part of the whole sign image that is sort of shifting towards the 10th place, towards the 10th image, is the one that's called atopos. And the other one, the epitopos one, is actually on the spot. Think of epicenter. When there's an earthquake, the epicenter is right on top of where the event happened in the earth. That's called the epicenter of the earthquake. So epitopos means it's right on the spot. It's right on the place where it is actually, and it's in conformity with the 11th whole sign place. Interesting. So when you look at the 12th image, which is the twins, that's called a bad daimon. But you can also see that part of the good daimon referred to the equal place shifts towards this principle of the 12th whole sign image. So that's interesting. We're going to have a look at that. So you can say that this region is atopos because it refers to the 12th place, Gemini, but it's not epitopos in the sense that it's also the equal 12th place. That's the difference between these principles. Is that clear as far as you can understand?
Yeah. The example really helps.
Okay.
And I think it'll take a learning curve for everyone to sort of learn this, but you've made it really clear with the example, so thank you.
Yeah, okay. I will do some, I have two example readings which are very illustrative of what's going on here. So again, this is what he said. We need to understand that this principle has to do with when it's the equal place is following the Caspar, you can read it, and it's epitopos, and when it's in that region, it's atopos. So you can read that at your leisure, and that's what's going on. Thus, the planet always remains connected to the whole sign place and its specific topic. So that's the most important conclusion about all this. The topic of the 11th whole sign image does not change into one that has the significations for the 10th place. That's very important. I will stress that again in the examples that I'm showing, and also in the next slide that I will show. But it will influence the topic where it's going towards, right? The atopos part is moving towards the other image, and that is has to do with how it's interpreted, but do not shift the principle of the whole sign place, the good diamond, as if it was a 10th place issue. That's not the case. Do not shift topics between these places. I will show you what how I understand this to be. Oh, I've written it here. Do not make the mistake of thinking that because the planet is now turned from the 11th place toward the 10th place, that it now signifies topics of the 10th place. It doesn't. It has, however, repercussions for how the planet functions. So I'll give an example. So Schmidt said, emptied of their pure topical significance through the mixing process, the regions that they define in the system of equal places remain to represent the regions where the planet is in place or on topic, epitopos, as opposed to the region where it's out of place, off topic. So on topic, off topic. That's the keywords to hang on to. So, and this tells us whether the signification of the planets manifests in a normal or abnormal manner. The word abnormal is a bit strange here. It's not quite abnormal, but it's not in the sense that it represents the pure meaning of the 11th whole sign place, the good daimon. So, okay, let's move on to the other one. Let me explain what you can see here. So, here you see the epitopos region of the 12th place in this example is on topic. So this has to do especially with the 12th topical place with reference to the first image, the ascendant. Why? Because the 12th place has to do, gets its attributes because it's related to the first place, the ascendant, the rising image, the natal person in person. So that's on topic. And the sliding off character of the 12th place is off topic here. Let me explain what that might signify. First, let me again say the referential character of the 11th topical place is off topic in that sense. And what's going on in the epitopos region? Well, the referential character of the 11th topical place is on topic here, as both the 11th whole sign place and the 11th equal place coincide, and they are both the good daimon. Okay, that's clear, right? Now, the suggestion is that it is representing the pure significations of the 11th place. They are not mixed, so this is purely about friendship. So let's say we use the word friendship for the 11th place. That's it. It's about your friends. And when we're talking about a planet in the atopos region, the friends issue is referred to the 10th place, then you are talking about the people that are supporting you in your work. And they are different sort of friends than the friends that you have pure on a relational basis, right? You have relations with people who are supporting you in your work or whatever you want to do, but you see the difference, right? That's the difference between them.
Yeah, I
So,
do. And it's interesting because what this will help, it seems, what this would help one do is sort of narrow in their delineation for more accuracy on where there's a
right.
mixed delineation.
Mhm.
Because we have many, many, many delineations for the 11th house, right? And so
Yeah,
there's the sort of like pure most, I hate using the word pure, but the most sort of like exact signification you're going to get of this sort of topical place. And then those falling off, or let's say the part that goes from the 11th into the 10th, now you're going to be able to delineate more specifically something that's more of a mixed topic. So this would help
right.
you hone in your
Exactly.
delineation style when it
Mhm.
comes to looking at how the planets are acting in
Yeah.
that place.
Yeah, so the planets are more in character when they are in epitopus region, as that's the next the sentence says. But the quote Fallon says that the planets can manifest their own significations. So I mean that to take that to mean their own topics, but also in their own typical manner. So when you have Venus there, you can expect all sorts of Venus-like topics with reference to friends, but they're also in a Venusian way. And that seems to be different in the Atopos region. So that's interesting, right? So
Mm.
when the benefits, and this is what Valens said, when they are lying in place, epitopos, and well situated, they affect, bring to completion their own significations according to their own nature. So that's what this says. So we need to take that into account. Okay, again, for trying to illustrate what this might signify, a planet here suggests that the 11th place signification is turned towards the topics of the 10th place. They are off topic for the 11th place. So, well, speaks for itself, so to speak. Friends in the specific sense of friendship, when it's epitopos, it's on topic. That's an interesting word to use. In the 12th place, it's on topic when it's in the equal place as well, and it's atopos when it's in the place referring to the 11th place. So I'm not quite sure what that might signify, but we need to think.
Let's say the atopos that is in the 10th place are your coworker friends, and then the delineation of the atopos in the 12th, then maybe it's your friends that have gone to jail.
Right, or perhaps the persons who pretend to be friends, but perhaps not quite so. So
Yeah, maybe like a frenemy, that
a
doesn't have your
frenemy,
best
yeah,
interest. Yeah.
that's a good word, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm thinking. So let me give a natal example because that's what we're after, right? This is a client of mine. Let's investigate what's going on here because I want to talk about that. So here you see both Saturn and Mercury being epitopos because they are in the 8th place, which is also the 8th house. Sorry, the 8th image, the whole sign image, and also in the 8th equal place. So they are on topic. The Helios, the sun, is the ruler of her ascendant, and the moon is the ruler of the 12th place, and they are both atopos in the 9th. Why? They are in the 9th place, but they are still in the atopos region of the 9th because they've fallen outside the equal cusp. So that's why they are atopos. And Mars is the ruler of the fourth and the 9th, and he's epitopos in the 9th place. So, okay, let me relate to you what she told me. I'm from a very intellectual family. My father was in academia and is a veritable walking encyclopedia on the topics of history, language, geography, literature, etc. My 4-year older brother is also an intellectual. My 6-year older sister has a PhD. My mother studied and taught French. And that's interesting because Mars rules the 4th place, is located in the 9th place of education in his own domicile. So this is a planet that is quite strong in the sense of being able to manifest its own qualities very acutely. So what happened? She also refers to the family of her father. Father is the fourth place, but also the ninth according to Vettich Valens. The family of her father is very intellectual, all having interesting and high-level jobs at UNICEF, UNESCO, in ministries, the World Bank, etc. And they all write books. Wow, that's pretty amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, at home as a child, the conversation at the kitchen table was, in my experience, always about difficult topics that I did not participate in. In fact, I was never asked anything. Mercury retrograde conjunct the Helios, the Sun, the ruler of the ascendant, maltreating my client by adherence, I will get into that, about what I thought about a particular topic either. They didn't think I could have any significant input, and in fact, I didn't have any. Usually, after about 5 minutes, I would lose the thread of the conversation and wander off in thought, off into my own world. Mercury retrograde, right? That's interesting. Because they are both epitopos in the eighth, so that's also a place of going into hiding, but a planet going backwards is also a planet that retreats from conversation or retreats from interaction with other people, in this case, right? So,
indeed, and also Mercury in Pisces, is that relevant here? The condition of Mercury not only being under the beams of the sun, but is Mercury in Pisces here?
yeah, because that's of course in its fall, in its depression, as it's called in Hellenistic astrology. So that is quite an interesting take again. Yeah. So this Mercury is challenged. Let's say in that sense, but it's also a monkey on the back of the Helios, the Sun, because it's an attachment, and that's also a maltreatment condition. So Mercury is a monkey on the back of Helios, the Sun, and the Sun is the ruler of her first place, her ascendant. And then she said, to this day, I lag behind in that kind of knowledge, and that has had an influence on my self-image that originated in that period. Again, Mercury is maltreating the ruler of the ascendant. So this is what she concluded about herself. I'm stupid. I'm not an interesting conversation partner. I have little or nothing to contribute. So that's the image that was coming from this principle. And strangely enough, it led me to preferring environments where I'm intellectually challenged and where people generally know more about things than I do. Curiously enough, I don't ever move in circles where I'm the smartest. So I hope this is an example that sort of shows how this can function, again, together with all sorts of other considerations. But yeah, this is the example I have from a natal chart. And I also have an example of a horary chart. That's also a very interesting one. Let me show you. This is a chart about a school inspection by a government agency. Now you can debate. I'm not going to give you the outcome or the answer to the question that was posed, but more how this chart represents and shows all these things having to do with what's going on in this investigation by this government agency. Why do I take the ninth as a government agency? That has to do with authority, which is something outside the school itself. And that has to do with the law, the rules that you need to abide when you're doing classes or when you're running a school. And the government inspection always comes to check on that. So that's the reason why I take the moon to be the representative of the government agency. Okay, so, well, you can see that the moon is in the 11th whole sign place, but it's atopos. So the inspection, the moon, involves investigating procedures and includes visiting and observing classes, which is the 11th place, where the children are, right? Evaluating and referring it back to the 10th, meaning how the school in general and the management functions address these issues, which is the general goal of all such inspections. So this interestingly shows that it's a topic of the 11th place, but it's referred back to the 10th place. It has to do with the investigation by the government agency, and it's referring back to the management of the school. So that's what the inspection is about. Does management implement the laws and the rules that are put up by the government agency? That's an interesting example. But there's more. The school and management are represented by Helios the sun, and it's located in the 12th place, but it's atopos. You can see right here it is, the sun. The sun is in Libra, the scales, but it's in the atopos region of the scale, so it's referred back to the 11th place. Again, the idea that it has to do with how classes are functioning, if that's okay or not, and if the rules that has to do with good quality of education are met by whatever is going on in classes. So you could generally say that these sort of inspections are always focused on what's possibly wrong with management, which has to do with the 12th place, what's not seen. So it's not things ignored or consciously avoided, but rather things not noticed or overlooked, and how that affects teaching classes, the 11th, in the sense I see what you cannot see, which is the 12th, which is the one of the goals of these investigations. Of course, there's always an amount of stress and uncertainty and anxiety surrounding such inspections, also having to do with the 12th place. We will be getting to the 8th place shortly.
Yeah, but like the 12th place is like fear of being in trouble. If you think about it as just like fears, anxieties, imprisonments,
Right.
you're like, oh my God, are these people my enemies? Like, am I going to
Right.
get in trouble? Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, so the sun atopos indicates it is for the sake of improving matters surrounding education of children in classes, which is the 11th place. Interesting. Now, the sun is adhered to by Mercury, so both of them are in the 12th whole sign topical place, but Mercury is also atopos because it's also in the 12th image, the bad daimon, but it's referred back to the 11th place. So again, we have an attachment by adherence. Mercury is also a monkey on the back of this Helios, the sun, in this example. So that's interesting. So Mercury, there we have it, rules the 8th topical place. So is also an indicator of possible fear and worries, connected to management, Helios the sun, the close scrutiny and in-depth research and writing of procedures, which is the 8th place, and the interviews with teachers and school management, which is Mercury. That's what the government agency is doing. Interesting. Now, both the Sun and Mercury have their domicile master, Venus in aversion. It's in the 11th whole sign place, which probably indicates no one has an idea about the outcome of the inspection. So there's no relation between the domicile master of Libra with the planets located there. So yeah, they're not getting information before and resting confident that oh, it will be all right. So that's another thing. So yeah, what I can't quite read it here. Oh yeah.
You're joined domicile, the Seneca Despotes.
Yeah, right. So because Venus is an aversion, please refer to the previous video that we did on that issue. The Seneca Despotes, the joint domicile master is Saturn, and that is the one taking over for both these planets in in Libra. So that's the one doing the consultation for these planets. So that has to do with, and that's a planet that is angular because it's in a pivot, it's in the 4th place. That's the only one that's in the pivot, so that's a very strong planet. Not strong, sorry, busy planet, to correct myself. So yeah, that's interesting. And he's also retrograde, so that promises something.
But dignified by being in domicile.
Yeah, it's a very good agency.
Where Venus is actually in fall and
yeah.
and in aversion. So, and just briefly, like even if you don't want to go back and watch Seneca Despotes, which is really great, Martien's last video, you'll see it on here, or maybe I can link it. I'm kind of still figuring out how to use YouTube, but it might pop up right now, or if it doesn't pop up, go grab it. But right now we're using the Seneca Despotes, which is just the joint domicile master, which a lot of you guys will recognize because Saturn is the exaltation lord of Libra. So just if you're wondering, oh, is that why they chose Saturn? And because of the exaltation lordship? Yes, that is why.
Right. Yeah. the joint domicile master. So he's the master of the domicile, and he's joining in whenever he can see this image, because it might also be that the Sonoica despotes is in a version, and then we need to find another one. But
Another, yeah. So that, yeah, you can look more into that. It's such a cool like thing. But yeah, we'll explain it more there. But if you were wondering, isn't Saturn the exaltation lord? Yes, and
it
it's the
is, yeah.
co-lord of Libra. So as you guys might know.
Right, yeah. Okay, so let's do another experiment. Let's say we are looking at the issue of the children in this school, and say we would investigate the fifth topical place for that investigation. So then we have to look at this planet, which is Jupiter. So we see Jupiter's in the sixth host sign place, and it's atopos because it's moving away from the cusp. So this is actually something, a planet that's normally associated with the sixth topical place. So that would suggest difficult things or problems or whatever, something that needs to be remedied surrounding the school population. That's the major concern here. Then that stands to reason, of course. And as a side note, at this school, the pupils are all medically or mentally challenged. Look at Venus, Epitopos in the 11th in her depression. That's an interesting take on that.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also the sixth, right? Like the sixth
Yeah.
and the fifth merging. So it's like students and children, but children that might have accident, illness, injury, or
Right,
physical limitation or something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also nicely illustrated by both the Sun, management, the 10th place, and Mercury, which is representing the groups and classes, and mentally, but both they are atopos. So again, referring both these planets to the context of the 11th place, management and functioning in groups, in classes. So Jupiter in the sixth host sign place, atopos, is again an interesting description of and a reflection on what's being investigated here in this investigation by this government agency. So it's about sixth place conditions. Jupiter is in the sixth host sign place. To do with pupils, Jupiter is the ruler of the fifth. In the educational situation, which is a general principle of Jupiter, but investigated in the sense of a scrutiny into whether or not the education is up to standards in the work environment, which is also the sixth place, or whether something is lacking. So that's the gist of this. So Jupiter atopos again puts all the above back in the context of principles themselves, referred back to the fifth, the children. That's interesting, right? Okay, so for my final hurrah, there are three planets that are epitopos. That's Mars in the eighth, Aries Mars in the eighth place, Venus in the 11th place, and Saturn in the fourth place. Okay. Now, Mars in the eighth place, epitopos, is suggestive of the critical examination of school documents because it's in the image of Mercury, right? So that's interesting because that's one of the things that's going on. This is what Aquarian told me about these sorts of inspections in the Netherlands. There is a framework drawn up by the Education Inspectorate on the basis of which they inspect the school. And they do dossier research, Mars, as you can see, and we supply all kinds of policy documents and other documents, Gemini, the twins. They do interviews, Mercury, with team members, the 11th, parents of the pupils, our approach or the appropriate authority of a pupil, which is the fifth, and they have a look around in the school. That might be Saturn in the fourth, perhaps. And this results in a finding, a conclusion. This inspection focused at whether the competent authority, the Sun, the 10th place, sufficiently monitored and had an overview of the necessary standard of quality, Saturn, and that was not the case. It was found lacking. Saturn is retrograde, to take note of. The end result in a horary investigation is often found in the fourth place. There we find Saturn is there in its own domicile, epitopos, but retrograde. So then and she said, then you get a remedial assignment, and we are working on that at the moment. So this is, I think this is very clear idea about how atopos and on topic and off topic is represented by this, and how you can use it to describe a situation whereby some indicator, in this case a significator, is referred back to something else. And in the context of whatever I've described here, to me that is very illustrative of the principle that is going on here. The planets that are off topic are referring an issue, which is in this case, for instance, when you look at the Selene, the moon, then you see that it represents the ninth people, which is the inspectorate, but what the inspectorate is doing is referring back to the 10th place, which is the management of the school. So to me, that is very illustrative of what is going on in such an investigation by a government agency. So, and I hope that this illustrates how we can use this division as it was meant by the Hellenistic astrologers in trying to get to grips with what is meant by the specific principles. So again, try to understand that, for instance, the moon is not something that is part and parcel of the 10th place, but is simply referred to it. That's something different when the moon was actually located in the image of the lion, which represents the management. When then the moon would have been there, then it would have been epitopos when it was in the right region, and then that had something to do with the personnel there or the people working there, etc., having to do with the management specifically in the sense of the persons. Then it would be on topic for that topic. But now it's not. It's simply having to do with the 11th place and the topic of the government agency, and that is referred back to management because that was the idea. It was focusing on whether the competent authority sufficiently monitored and had an overview of the necessary standard of quality. And that's simply really beautifully shown by this moon being in this position, atopos, in the 11th image, but referring back to the 10th image. So, well, yeah, that's what we have to work with. So it's not easy, but you can use it because people say, yeah, but it's so confusing. Well, astrology is always confusing because there are so many things that you have to take into account. So now you have to take one more thing into account.
Yeah, there's always one more thing, and that's what makes it fun to be an astrologer.
Exactly.
There's always one more thing to study and one more thing to learn, so it never gets
Right.
old.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is when you want to learn this, you try to look at some horary principles, the charts that you have or that are expurgated by people in certain texts or whatnot, and try to use it with this system. And then you can see whether or not the situation that is described by the horary chart and what you know of this situation, as I did here in this example, then you see how beautifully this refers back to the principles that are actually going on in this investigation and how it clearly shows what the planets are doing and where they are referred to, or are they standing on their own principles and having to do with their own symbolism and their own manner of doing things, which is exactly what Valens suggested by planets being on topic or being off topic. So yeah, interesting.
It is. Thank you for presenting this and for giving examples and like visualizations. I think it helps so much as a learning tool. You're such an awesome teacher. People can get more of your teaching skills and teachings on your Patreon, on your YouTube channel, which is here. So website, YouTube, Patreon. I'll link all this below. And then, of course, we have Schmidt and Ellen's work. I think it's on sale right now. I don't know how long it's staying on sale, but last time I checked earlier this week, someone was like, oh, it's on sale. So there's that. And then Planet Dance. I've been playing around with Planet Dance since our last hang, our last video. And it's fun and I love it. So it's really, thank you, Ed Greek page on Planet Dance. That has a lot of really cool stuff on there. And Ed reached out to me and was just like, oh yeah, we're working on this. And, just very personable, very reachable, and it's super fun. Yeah. And free.
And Sean Kramers is the one who invented the language with which other people can do the software needed, and it seems to be very easy. I don't know anything about it, but it seems to be a very handy, a very good manner of how do you say, developing software, astrological techniques into a program like a Planet Dance. So yeah. And you asked about a vestigium. So here it is. This is what I'm doing with this new name. So it's called Vestigium Hermetis is actually the footprint of Hermes. And it's nice that it has my name in it, but that was not my goal. It was meant to honor Robert Schmidt because I really think he is also a very important person who did a lot of work on actually the principle of Hermetis, the Hermetic teachings, etc. So that's why I called it. This is the project that I keep working on until I'm no longer around, I think, because it's fascinating and I really love it. So yeah, it's in honor of both their works because his wife, Ellen Black, also did a lot of work in this field to support her husband, but also to support us astrologers going on with this material. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is the lineage we're a part of as Hellenistic astrologers. Whether there's different factions, different students, and different iterations, this is our lineage. And it's the lineage, or, as Robert Schmidt coined, the system of Hermes. And it's really beautiful. So we dedicate this to Hermes, thrice great. And thank you for putting together this sort of mission statement, or just like, something for us to gather around to sort of honor our lineage, because this is where we come from as Hellenistic astrologers, all of us. I'm guessing, like maybe not, like you can, if you're not, you can tell us like how you came to Hellenistic astrology without this lineage. But we've got all of our teachers, Demetra George, Chris Brennan, like all of Austin, I think was all of us that have been inspired by this work and this translation sort of momentum. So thank you for putting that together. So like you said, it's not in your name, but you just happen to get blessed by birth with lineage of the Hermes name, which I love.
As did I, because Schmidt called his course in 4 parts the system of Hermes. So yeah. So it's not an honor of me, but I'm very happy with my family.
Yeah, you got that little gem that was like meant for you, and I love that. And so, okay, thank you, Martien Hermes, for presenting that. And okay, people can find you. We covered that. I think this is really cool for people to play with, even in your own chart, or like, let's say you have a mashup, like a stellium, where things are falling like all throughout the sign, and it's just like really hard to untangle. You can untangle it by sort of putting it in different places and seeing how different planets are signifying different parts of your chart, and like where they're active. But I like this idea to give us like hone in the delineation even more so into our own framework or accuracy, in order to say like, okay, this is going to represent friends, but friends from work. Or, it really is going to help you kind of understand if it's, I don't know if I'm thinking about it right to say like mixing significations between the, let's say for instance, the 11th and the 10th, it could be, friends, but not just purely your friends and acquaintances or your fan base, but like your friends and acquaintances and fan base that have to do with your career or something like this. So it's like,
that's it. Yeah.
So
that's how I understand it. Yeah.
That's cool. And it gives us like a little bit more to say, and it can help when you're sort of untangling the framework of a chart. And I think that's where new students, I do a bit of tutoring, and I have a lot of friends, like I have a lot of friends in various parts of their study, because I love studying. You guys probably know me from several different book clubs and like all over. But I think that's like one of the major hangups when a brand new student, they've mastered the Hellenistic sort of rules, right? They understand dignity. The delineation part is the hard part. That's where people come for help, for tutoring, for like, I know all the stuff, but I don't know what I can say. Like, what do I say about it? Delineation is a fantastic art. And it's where we have to become an artist, or not a creator, we're not making something up, but it's when we have an opportunity to say something. And that's the hard part. That's a lot of pressure. It takes a lot of, like, now I've made it through all these filters and now I'm left with this little bit, like, what do I say about it or whatever, And I think this could be helpful, because then you don't have like three planets where you're like, well, you have a lot of friends or whatever. It's like, okay, well, this one could be your friends from work, and these could be the situations you're dealing with them. And then these could be the friends that maybe don't have your best interest in mind. Let's say they're, towards the 12th, that sliver in the 12th. Or these are just, friends and acquaintances that sort of have just their pure meaning with the inside of your life, or whatever other place they're ruling. So I think, although it's complicated to like layer and layer all these like you're all these filters, right, where you're saying, okay, one more thing to add to your filter system of Hellenistic astrology, right? But it actually helps you not just be like technical and whatever, like another cool layered technique, but it helps people getting tripped up on like what you can actually say, and it gives you another way to be able to differentiate what you're going to say. So it's really helpful. So thank you for kind of giving us those examples and thinking about it and putting it together in a way that's like usable for people, because I think a lot of it can become really theoretical and, like you said, confusing. But the more you understand why you're using a tool and for what, it's actually not just a bunch of confusing tools in front of you. It's actually super helpful to you to be able to like do something with, right? Like tools should be, right?
Exactly. So you need to familiarize yourself with this new way of looking at the chart. Yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And I will spend some more time studying it. I will spend some more time looking at it. Please feel free to leave your questions below or email Martien or myself. I don't know how much I can help with this specific topic because I'm still studying it myself. But Martien or I can help you get in touch with how to better understand the technique. Or I guess, are we calling this a technique or a method, or just how to understand this interpretive tool?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's I'm almost inclined to say, well, this is how it should be done.
Yeah.
It might be a bit offensive to all other systems that are there, but the principle is that it's when you're studying Hellenistic astrology, this is what they did, or this is suggestive of how it should be used. And it's pretty difficult to, and that's where the problems are coming. It's very difficult for me to try to understand, well, when you use system A for this sort of chart reading and system B for another one, I have difficulty with that, because I think this is the basic one. And there are, I think, also philosophical implications with that, having to do with what are we actually talking about? Are all these systems, are they simply confusing, or are they based on something real? And all the adherents of all these systems will say, yeah, it's real. But I'm much in doubt of that. So, but that has to do with wanting to develop myself as a Hellenistic astrologer. Then I have to use the method that they do. So people can blame me, well, you're doing just the same thing as I'm doing. I'm using this system because I was taught that. Well, yeah, goes for me as well. This is what the text teach us, and so you should do this. Also with horary charts or natal charts or whatever.
Yeah, it is interesting. And here's the thing. I think that people can understand, maybe if you're a super harmonious, peace-loving person like me, where I'm like, let's not fight about house systems, but let's also talk about it, right? So it's like, okay, here's the framework for me. And Christopher Warnock, who I've had on the channel, talks a lot about worldview, right? And I think that becomes more and more apparent and more important the more you study something like astrology, right? The more you're actually active in this sort of space. So that's important. But the point is like, we don't have to advocate ourselves against something else. We can just advocate what we're into. Like, I don't have to say, like, I'm against Christianity, for example. I'm against Christianity for this and this and this because I believe this. I can just say, I believe this, which is very different from Christianity, and it doesn't make sense to me over there. I'm sorry to bring religion into this, but that's another hot, or like a political thing, or like those are hot button topics, right? Like, so what I think is important to keep in mind is that if someone's interested in your work, they're going to want to hear what you have to say about a topic. Just because you, or you could say I, or whatever, I'm using you as an example. Just because you happen to believe a certain thing doesn't mean someone can't believe something else, right? And then the people that also think like you can sort of hang out and learn from that. And then the people that also think like the other person can hang out and learn with that. I think diversity is a part of life. There can be disagreements within diversity, and like those should be respected, you know? And so we can very well say, you know, because Warnock does this all the time. He's like, there's many, many, many methods and there's many worldviews and none of them are wrong, right? But then we get to narrow in our worldview as to our proclivities, our interests, our natures, and things like that. So we don't have to fight with people that are different. We can discuss the differences, learn to name them, learn to talk about them, like, so that we can have a clear delineation of what the differences are. And then we get to have our preferences and we get to say, well, this one makes more sense to me and this one makes more sense to you. And we can respect that. So for the people that are interested in this, I don't think, or something else, I don't think we need to be in defense of that. Just being able to understand it and understand and be able to communicate the differences that are valuable and could be respected. So in putting together the Hellenistic part of the tradition, we have this that's offered up for us to be able to study and try to understand.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening and tuning in. And thank you for being here, Martien, and presenting examples for us and really trying to help us, you know, wrestle or grapple with what it is that we're learning, and try to understand it and use it and practice with it better.
My pleasure. So
thanks, everyone. Again, Martien's channel. We've got planetary merch. We've got a merch store. Read my thesis. And thank you all for your kind tuning in and kind support. Until next time.
Bye.
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 Matao kako bersama you kena soba da soba kena matai banako di ma kena soba and soba atai banake ujuno ba ikana kamaya da onga ija Okoyo Marcena Mataribe kana sabaso Inakina Tabaine Toyogas Imbayatoma Watabaike Tiona Makano Yoga Sono me abagorina Gamoya de goyimi On my way go by Tiona Makano Yoga Sono me abagorina Tomato matau kako bersama you kena soba da soba kena da iba nakawati ma kena soba en soba ate iba nake aujuno ikana kamaya da onga ikasha koyo okoyo matsena mata ibe kana sabaso inakina tabaine do you bounce in by it doma what the bike Dio no beccano io bande sono mia bagogina che voglio cogliere on me go Dio no beccano io bande sono mia bagogina Copa na hit tomato it's a market
Siento que eres grande como yo. Ya no me preocupa que me ames. Y siento que soy grande como tú. Y ya no me preocupa quién amar. Porque yo te amo. Porque tú me amas. Porque estoy cantando lo que tú me estás bailando, que ya no tengo miedo. Porque yo te amo. Porque tú me amas. Porque estoy cantando lo que tú me estás bailando, que ya no tengo miedo.
Kaya matau kako bersama you kena soba da soba da soba da soba da soba da soba ate iba nake aujuno ikana kamaya da onga ikasha Go